Welcome to Off the Wall. My name is Trey. Thank you so much for joining me today. Whether you're listening, watching, hope all is well in your world. All is well in the indoor and arena football world for the most part. Action-packed weekend this past weekend. The AFL, which is always electric, had their week 7. So we'll go through that, do a little recap of some of the highs and lows and everything in between there. We'll touch on a brief preview of week 8 and some of the games we can look forward to there. And we have our first interview in Off the Wall history. That's right. This episode, first interview, and it's with the legendary running back Justin Rankin. He was the running back for the Bay Area Panthers championship squad last year. So we'll touch base with him, see how things are going in his world, get a feel for the journey that he went through in indoor football, talk about what's next for him, some exciting things on the horizon, and get to know his football journey a little bit more. It was a super exciting interview, and I was glad that he was able to make some time for it. And lastly, we'll dive into the AFL. AFL 3.0 had their first weekend of football, week 1 of 3.0. And I figured the best way to go about breaking down what happened in the AFL was to do a segment. Sure, we'll call it a segment. The good, the bad, and the ugly. There was plenty of all three throughout the entire weekend of the AFL and no shortage of topics to get into. But before we dive into that, please give us a follow on Instagram, X/Twitter, and TikTok. We are at Off the Wall FB, F as in foot, B as in ball, Off the Wall FB on each of those. Had a great time connecting with folks on each of those platforms, having some interesting conversations with some individuals, having some fun debates on certain topics. So come say hi, give us a follow, and got some exciting things in the works for each of those. So without further ado, AFL Week 7. The first game of Week 7, we had the Iowa Barnstormers at the Green Bay Blizzard, and the Green Bay Blizzard walked away with a 40-33 win. And man, Green Bay's defense is unbelievable. First 5 games of the season, here's a number of points Green Bay has given up in each of those. 44, 24, 24 again, 35, and 33. That is extremely low for indoor and arena football. The fact that they've been able to do that consistently this far through the season, it's almost like you're waiting for that game where it's like, oh, this is the game, it'll all self-destruct and they're going to give up 50 or 60. I don't see that happening with this team. This team is very, very good on defense, whether that be Ravarius Rivers, Sean Mustin, Rafiq Abdul-Wahid, like all across the board, they have ballers on this defense and playmakers that the DBs are flying around the field, making plays in the passing game. The D-line is disrupting the running game, very disciplined on read option plays and shut down the Iowa offense in a lot of ways, strictly just from the defensive line play. So Green Bay is a very, very good team, and they are going to be a legit contender in the East. I know I had my hesitations over the past couple of weeks because I think my exact quote was, they're a boring team to watch. But they're growing on me, and they are a very, very good defensive team. And offensively, they don't make a ton of mistakes. They lean on you in the running game and really make you earn it every single play. So Green Bay is very good, and they're going to be a tough out for any team in the East and going forward. And on the other side, Iowa, the main conversation with Iowa has been on their offense, and Kyle King at quarterback got a little bit better this week. Completion percentage wise, still below 50%. So I would like to see Iowa get the ball out of his hands on some shorter routes a little more often, a few more screens, a few more slants, a few more of those types of things. Because as the game went on, he was holding the ball a little bit longer, and that's not the recipe for success for Iowa, and is certainly not the recipe for success to beat Green Bay. I did like that they had their running back Robert Washington had 16 touches in the game. I think that was a great improvement from last week. They need to continue doing that and continue getting the ball into the hands of some of their wide receivers so that they can make some plays and have it not live and die with Kyle King, just because he's putting it together, but can't put it all on his shoulders just yet. The next game we're going to talk about is the San Antonio Gunslingers at the Frisco Fighters, and Frisco suffered their first loss of the season in this one. San Antonio won 54-52, and man, Sam Castronova, quarterback for San Antonio, he is just unbelievable. Here are his stats through the first 5 games of the season. He is 93 for 132 passing for 989 yards, 28 touchdowns, and 1 interception. 28-1. That's the ratio. And rushing, he's got 144 yards rushing and 7 touchdowns on the ground. It's just ridiculous numbers. He has more completions than any other quarterback except for one has attempts. So he's completed more passes than nearly every other quarterback has attempted passes this year. So he's just extremely efficient. He puts the ball exactly where it needs to be for his players to go out and get it. And he's not just making short little dink and dunk passes at the line of scrimmage. Like, he's chucking the ball down the field and taking big chunks out of the defense. This game really showed what San Antonio is capable of achieving if their defense can get a couple of stops, and that's what they did. Surprisingly, they were able to catch Frisco in a couple situations where they stopped Frisco from scoring right before the half, and they were able to get a big turnover at the end of the game and stop Frisco in the fourth quarter as well. So they got their couple of stops. The offense did their part, as they always do. The defense is finally starting to figure things out, and San Antonio is looking like they could be a very dangerous team. After those first couple of games, man, their defense, like, they weren't putting fear in anybody, but this offense has continued to excel. Sam Casanova is definitely probably if not a top three, top one MVP candidate at this point. Like, he's just unbelievable. So hats off to San Antonio for turning things around and taking down one of the best teams in the league in Frisco. On the other side, Frisco played pretty good, all things considered. They just got outlasted and outperformed. It's as simple as that. San Antonio's offense was a lot more efficient and a lot more crisp with things. TJ Edwards didn't have the best day passing the ball, but he still cashed in 4 rushing touchdowns and 2 passing touchdowns. So that just shows where TJ Edwards is as a quarterback. He had 6 touchdowns, and we're saying it wasn't his best day. Like, it's an incredible situation that they find themselves in, but at the end of the game, Frisco was down a couple of points. They had the ball with 1 minute left. You kind of got the feeling, all right, they're going to go down, drive down the field, work the clock, and score right at the end. And there was just no sense of urgency from Frisco, and it was very odd to watch. They were down 2, under a minute left. Their first play that they ran was a little read option play. I get it. TJ Edwards is great. You need to keep that in the rotation, even in that situation. But they let a good 15, 20 seconds run off the clock, setting up the next play. They had timeouts in their pocket. And it even got to the point where the announcers were yelling, go, 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 go. Like, what are we doing? Go, go, go. And there was just no urgency. In the very next play, they tried to toss it downfield and it ended up being intercepted. And that was basically the game. So, to Frisco's credit, they don't find themselves in situations very often where they're down late in the game. So it could be a big learning opportunity for them. But yeah, it was just so odd to watch. It's like, guys, there's 30 seconds left in the game. You're walking up to the line of scrimmage like you got 15 minutes. Like, it was just very, very bizarre. But Frisco isn't going anywhere. They're still a very dangerous team. I mean, they scored 52 and nearly won. So they're not going anywhere, but it was interesting to see them flounder just a little bit in the final moments of the game. It in a way, it humanized them for the rest of the Eastern Conference and made them not look as scary, if that makes sense. Next thing we're going to talk about is the Massachusetts Pirates at the Sioux Falls Storm. And I say at loosely because this was a neutral site game that was actually in Fargo, North Dakota. So it was in the Dakotas. So technically Sioux Falls was the home team, but it was a neutral site. Massachusetts walked away with a 43-38 win. So Sioux Falls scored at the very end to make this look a little bit closer than it actually was. But Massachusetts is getting bit by the injury bug very badly over the past couple of weeks. Starting quarterback Alejandro Benefield missed the game and was listed as out right before kickoff. And their backup, I want to make sure I get his name, Connor Digenhard, sorry, got his first AFL start. And all things considered, he did pretty good. He went 15 for 20 for 163 yards and 4 touchdowns. So pretty good on paper, but he also had 2 interceptions that stacked on top of some of the other mistakes that the Massachusetts was making could have been their downfall. Isaac Zico, one of the most exciting wide receivers in football. He missed the game due to injury while he's on the short-term IR. So Thomas Owens and T.O. Redding had to step in and make some big plays, and they did that. Each of them got 2 receiving touchdowns rather, and they were pretty impressive grabs too. So Massachusetts just is so deep when it comes to their offensive weapons because they still have Jimmy Robinson at running back who goes out and catches passes in the receiving game too. So it was good to see their other weapons step up, and the fact that they were able to get a win with Alejandro Benefield being out, that's got to make you feel good as a Pirates fan. But what doesn't make you feel good as a Pirates fan is the fact that they had 19 penalties on the day. 1-9, 19. And that's just an absurd amount by any standard, any level of the game, high school, college, pro, arena, indoor, Canadian, European, like any level of the game. 19 penalties is absurd. And it nearly cost them the game. And honestly, it kept the Storm in the game. The Storm, they didn't look too great, but Massachusetts was keeping them around from all these penalties that they were committing. So these self-inflicted wounds and those interceptions nearly cost them the game, but end of the day, a win is a win. They all count the same. They were able to hold on, but Massachusetts definitely didn't look like the Massachusetts of the first couple of weeks, and they looked a little rough. On the other side, it was more of the same on offense from Sioux Falls. They don't really make big plays in the passing game consistently throughout the game. Week to week, it seems like Sioux Falls kind of has a medium-ish height floor, but a very low ceiling in terms of what they can do efficiency-wise on offense. Through 5 games, they've scored 32, 41, 40, 35, and 38. They're not getting in the held to the 20s, but they're also not scoring in the 50s either. And with some of the teams that they play on a week-to-week basis in the East, they're going to have to score 50. They're going to have to rip the top open and let the ball fly around. I think their best game that they played on offense was against Massachusetts early in the season, and it just hasn't looked great since then. With the signing of Lorenzo Brown Jr. last week, you would think that they would start him to try to salvage the season. And if that is the case, they need to toss him the keys to the car and be like, "Here you go, bud. You're back. Let's ride." But if that's not the case, you kind of got to stick with Billy Hall. And if you've kind of accepted your fate at 0-5 at this point, you kind of got to roll with Billy Hall and see where his development progresses from here. It's with Sioux Falls, I hate using a baseball analogy for it, but this is the best I got. They need more home runs, and their offense is giving them singles right now. So I think they need to blow the top off the offense and let the ball fly a little bit more. That's what they need, but I'm honestly not sure if Billy Hall is the quarterback to get that done. Next up, we've got the Duke City Gladiators at the Vegas Nighthawks, and in this game, Vegas walked away with a 42-27 victory. And this is a pretty ugly game all across the board. Duke City brought out their 4th different starting quarterback. I think their 5th quarterback in 5 games that they've used on offense in some capacity. And the offense just couldn't get anything going. Their quarterback that they started was Alfonso Howard. They signed him on Thursday, and at least they announced the signing on Thursday, and they played on Saturday. And you could tell that there were only a couple days for him to get comfortable in the offense. Looked like improv. They were just kind of making things happen on the running game, on scrambles. And in the second quarter, they connected on a couple medium to long range passing plays where it looked like they might be able to pull off the upset. They were going toe to toe with Vegas, especially with some of the struggles Vegas had early on. But second half, they just couldn't get any points on the board with any consistency. And it's just it's a tough watch watching the Duke City offense. But they did just sign Joe Mancuso, who was formerly of the Vegas Nighthawks earlier this year and last season. So I think he might be a better fit quarterback-wise, but again, that's going to be the 6th different quarterback that's come through the door for them through 6 weeks, assuming he gets to start next week. So I think Joe Mancuso will be a little bit better fit for them and hopefully get the ball to some of the weapons they have on offense. But I feel really bad for this Duke City defense. They are a very, very good defense that they're just getting held back by this offense. If their offense could even put 35-40 on the board with consistency, their defense would be able to keep them in games. They scored 27 in this game, but one of those touchdowns came on a pick 6 early in the game. So realistically, the offense only scored 20 points. That's very bad in indoor football. And yeah, the Duke City defense, they're treading water, keeping the team alive, but then the offense just goes up and throws them an anchor to hold while they're trying to tread water. It's like that's not a good look for anybody, and it's not a recipe for success. So Duke City's defense is doing the best that they can, all things considered. They just need their offense to have any sort of consistency moving forward, and they'll be able to put some W's in the old record. But it's the offense is bad. It's very, very bad. Speaking of bad offenses, Vegas didn't look good. They looked human for the first time this year. Jerome Johnson didn't have a great game. He ended up getting pulled in the first half. He started off 3 for 9 with 2 interceptions. Something was just off. Couldn't tell what it was, but George Reyna, backup quarterback for Vegas, came in and kind of righted the ship. Went 7 for 9, 3 touchdown passes after that to hold on to the win. And Coach Mike Davis said after the game that he knew going in that this was going to be a game they got punched in the mouth and they were going to face some adversity. His team wasn't fully on board with that, but as soon as they got punched in the mouth, they were like, all right, it's happening. We gotta figure some things out. So not a lot went well for Vegas's offense, due in part to Duke City's defense. Duke City's defense did a very good job of making them uncomfortable. The secondary was delivering some big hits. The defensive line was disrupting things in the running game. But this type of game is something that can humble a team, and the fact that Vegas was able to be humbled a little bit while still walking away with a win is good news. And you can make the case that this couldn't have come at a better time for Vegas, because who do they have next week? They have the reigning champions, currently undefeated Bay Area Panthers. So if you're going to get humbled and come back down to earth, this is the week to do it. Next up, we've got the Northern Arizona Wranglers at the Tucson Sugar Skulls, and Northern Arizona walked away with a 34-31 win here. Starting with Northern Arizona, I'm not sure if they're a good bad team or a bad good team. And I say that because a few weeks ago, it looked like they couldn't do any wrong. They were dropping 57 points through 3 quarters on teams. They were, they everything was clicking. They were bebopping and scatting all over the place. And it just seems like they've regressed heavily back to the mean. And the past couple of weeks have been rough. Last week, they played Duke City, didn't look good on offense. But this week, they played Tucson against a backup quarterback. They didn't really blow you away. It wasn't typical football that you saw from them early on in the season. And I think a part of the reason that they're struggling a little bit is that they're not getting as many players involved in the running game as they did in their first few games. Over the past 2 games, quarterback Joshua Jones has accounted for 17 out of 31 rushing attempts, which isn't ideal. That's over 50% of the rushing attempts are coming at the quarterback position. In the games where Arizona was absolutely rolling on offense, they were getting multiple offensive players involved in the running game, and Jones only accounted for 32% of the team's rushing attempts. So you go from 55-60% over the past 2 games where they haven't looked great, down to 32% from those games where they were rolling and they were looking very good. I think it's pretty black and white what needs to be done. So with as many weapons as they have on offense, they should be getting those pieces a little bit more involved, and honestly not putting as much pressure on Jones to have to do everything too. They got another 10, 11 weeks of the season, and you don't want him getting involved in every single play. Like spread some of that punishment of getting crunched into the walls to some of the other folks on the team besides the quarterback, right? So they keep winning, which is always a good thing. Again, a win is a win. They all count the same. But yeah, they haven't looked good while doing so. And against some of the better teams in the league, that could come back to haunt them, because Duke City hasn't found a win yet. They struggled against Duke City. Tucson only has 1 win on the season. They struggled against Tucson. So they're going to have to bounce back here soon. But on the other side, Tucson needs their quarterback back badly. On the broadcast, they said that he's been missing time due to a hyperextended knee, and they need Malik Mitchell back in the lineup very, very badly. You could just tell that he's the straw that stirs the drink in that offense. And they have had 2 different quarterbacks over the past 2 games make starts in place of the injured Mitchell, and it just wasn't the same. They eventually kind of got some things figured out later in the game, towards the end of the game. They made this a lot closer than it actually was. This was a 10-point game up until about 50 seconds left, where they scored a touchdown, and or actually a minute left, where they scored a touchdown and made it a 3-point game, covered the 5.5-point spread, by the way. But Mitchell just provided that extra oomph to the offense that they are very, very clearly missing. And they got Mike Jones a little bit more involved. Last week, we talked about if Malik Mitchell is not in the game, you have to feed the ball to Mike Jones. And how many touches did he have? He had 11 total touches on offense, 6 carries, five catches. So a little bit more involvement. And they ended up making the comeback attempt in the fourth quarter, but it was a little too late after a slow start. They scored 7 points in the first half, and you're just not setting yourself up for success when you score single-digit points in any half of any game in the AFL. So they have a much-needed bye week coming up, and hopefully Malik Mitchell will be healthy enough to come back against the Arizona Rattlers on May 11th. That will be a massive opportunity to get the season back on track, because right now they only have 1 win on the year. They're sitting at 1-4. So this offense needs to get rolling, and it starts with Malik Mitchell. The next game we've got is the Tulsa Oilers at the Quad City Steamwheelers, and this was a shootout. Tulsa ended up winning this game 72-59. 72-59. The over-under was, I think, 86.5, and Tulsa nearly got that all on their own. They became the first team in 2024 to break the 70-point threshold. So big shout out to Tulsa and the offensive explosion there. And they did so emphatically. Tulsa's wide receiver, Alexis Rosario, had a monster day. He had 6 catches for 123 yards and 3 touchdowns, while quarterback Daniel Smith accounted for 8 total touchdowns. Those 3 that he threw to Rosario, and 5 rushing touchdowns on the ground. A lot of those came on QB sneaks, tush pushes, brotherly shoves, whatever you want to call them. This was a great game on offense, and it was also a pretty good one on defense. And I know it sounds weird to say that, seeing that they gave up 59 points, similar to what we talked about with San Antonio earlier. In this game, it was a shootout. They just needed a couple of stops, and that's what Tulsa's defense was able to provide them. They had multiple stops, and they flipped the momentum a handful of times throughout the game, and that ultimately kept their foot on the gas and kept them ahead. But it is interesting to look at Tulsa's season so far. They're 3-0 against teams not from Frisco, and they're 0-2 against teams from Frisco. So the good news for Tulsa is they don't play a team from Frisco again for the rest of the regular season. Potentially they will in the playoffs. So this could be a good omen for them. They were able to put 72 up here. Last week against Frisco, they were only able to put up 30, 36. Good news, you don't have to play Frisco again. Yeah, they're just dumping points on these other teams. So we'll see if they can continue that trend, and they get the 0-5 Jacksonville Sharks served on a platter next week. So that game could get very ugly very quickly. On the other side, Quad City didn't get the win, but there were still some positives for them to build off of through the rest of the season. They continued to get more and more efficient on offense, and they just had a couple costly turnovers that proved to be daggers for them. It's unfortunate for them that Tulsa just could do no wrong in this game, because if you play this exact game the way Quad City's offense did against 70-80% of the league, they probably win this game. They just happen to be in a matchup with a team that caught fire and could do no wrong on the offensive side of the ball. And Judd Erickson, I had my doubts a little bit earlier in the season. He had a better day spreading the ball around to all of his wide receivers. And but as it's been a lot with Quad City throughout this season, the self-inflicted wounds did them in. So if they can clean up some of those smaller mistakes, they had a fumbled handoff that got returned for a touchdown, had a couple bad passes here and there. You clean up some of those things, you don't open the door for Tulsa to run away with it and score 70 points. Usually 59 is more than enough to secure a win in the IFL, but yeah, if they can clean up the self-inflicted wounds, they'll be perfectly fine. Next up, we've got the Bay Area Panthers at the San Diego Strike Force, and Bay Area walked away with a 33-32 victory. This was a very low-scoring game, especially given the caliber of the offenses, but this was still a thrill ride. There are 3 things that are certain in this world: death, Texas and the California Clash, which is what we're calling this rivalry here, being an absolute thrill right down to the wire. Last week, I was going to say a couple weeks. No, they played last week. Thrilling finish. This game was no different. San Diego was down 27 at one point. They just could not get anything going on offense, but they stormed all the way back in the second half, got a few stops. Bay Area missed a field goal badly from the 1 yard line that could have possibly sealed it for Bay Area then and there. San Diego drove down the field, scored a touchdown to be down by 1, but they went for 2 and didn't get it. So they went for 2 twice in the fourth quarter, didn't get it either time. In hindsight, you kick an extra point on just one of those, it's a tie game. You kick an extra point on 2 of those successfully, you're up by 1. So San Diego is an aggressive offense with their play calling, which is usually what helps them win games and is a benefit to them. But this week it killed them and was ultimately the thing that did them in. And two weeks in a row they played Bay Area and they got 2 losses. So they went from being an undefeated team at the top of the conference to being 3-2 and somewhere in the middle. So offense has got to do a better job getting out to a better start in the weeks ahead, which I think they will. Bay Area is a very, very good team, and San Diego's offense will get things corrected. I can only imagine the halftime speech they got from Coach after scoring only 7, and that 7 came on a return, not even on offense. So, but on the other side, Bay Area very nearly squandered this game too. So credit to San Diego for storming back, but Bay Area didn't do themselves any favors in preserving that lead offensively. They kind of just shut down in the second half. It seemed like they were more so trying to run the clock and trying to end the game rather than staying aggressive on offense. So it's good that they got Daquan Neal back at quarterback, and he looked good in spurts, but there wasn't any big, like, massive plays. There was a play to JT Stokes that was a touchdown pass that looked pretty good, but the Bay Area offense just didn't look like what they have their potential to be in this game. And San Diego has a good defense, but Bay Area still could have stomped on the gas a little bit more in the second half. So again, Bay Area is the class of the IFL. They're still undefeated, and they are going to be facing another undefeated team in the Vegas Nighthawks next week, but we'll get into that game a little bit later. Last game of the week is going to be the Jacksonville Sharks at the Arizona Rattlers, and the Arizona Rattlers won 55-35. So a big 20-point victory for the Rattlers in quarterback Dalton Snead's returning game to the lineup. He got injured in that first game of the season and ended up missing a handful of games, and this was his first game back. So the fact that first game back, they were able to score 55, that's pretty good. That's a good sign. They started off very, very rusty in the first half, only getting 5 points from a field goal and a deuce. So they didn't even score any touchdowns in the first quarter, but they still managed to put up 55 throughout the rest of the game. So, yeah, Dalton Snead looked very, very good. And if this is his first game back, I can only imagine what the rest of the games are going to look like from here. And especially if Arizona is able to get a little bit more healthy week by week as well. They started rough and lost some nail biters, but they look primed to get back on track and get some more wins in the old column and keep up with the Western Conference. They had a pretty healthy rushing attack too, which was great to see. I think 101 total yards collectively as a team, with Shannon Brooks getting 3 rushing touchdowns and Snead accounting for 2 of his own. So the rushing attack looked great. They were efficient on the ground, 5 total touchdowns on the ground as well. So this could be the flip of the switch that Arizona needed to get back on track. On the other side, Jacksonville seems to have a cap on their offensive potential. We talked about ceilings and floors before with another team. They just look like they have a hard cap on what they can do on offense, and that's got to be upsetting if you're a Sharks fan. This is the second week in a row that they've scored their season high in points, which is only 35. So in a league where you're seeing teams score 50, 40, 70, they're only able to max out at 35, which is not going to cut it. It's not good. This isn't the NAL anymore. Like in the IFL, you have to be able to run the ball effectively. You have to be able to score points. And they're just not doing that right now. They were in this game until the second half when they just kind of unraveled at the seams, and Arizona just kept with their scoring pace. This is what happened on 3 straight scoring drives, or 3 straight drives rather, for the Jacksonville Sharks in the second half. Interception, missed field goal, turnover on downs. all three of those things happening in order while Arizona continues to score, Jacksonville was in this, and they just came unraveled at the seams. So it's so frustrating to watch them play because they have what it takes to keep up with teams, but they just can't finish. And on paper, quarterback Fred Payton Jr., it was his second start in the IFL. He didn't play bad per se, but he just didn't execute in those moments where they needed him to pull through. If you just look at the box score, you're like, oh, that's decent, that's not bad. But it was in the little moments that they needed him to make a play, to get that first down, to convert the fourth down, convert the third down. They just couldn't make it happen. If you're Jacksonville, I think you have to stick with Peyton Jr. at quarterback, and just see what you got with him. Because honestly, right now you're sitting at 0-5. Your offense is capped out at 35 points as your ceiling, it seems. And you need to get things figured out, and you need to kind of go through some growing pains with Peyton and with the offense as a whole. So I think you got to stick with him and just give him the reps and see how he can develop from here, just because some of the other quarterback options on the team weren't working out very well either. So I think he gives you the best chance to win. He showed what he can do in the ground game against Vegas last week. Passing, again, he wasn't bad this week. He just didn't provide what the team needed in those pivotal moments. That was IFL Week 7. Very exciting week. Offenses are starting to come alive to an extent. Some offenses are starting to come alive, but it was overall a really great week, especially with the head-to-head competition of the AFL kicking off. I think the IFL games delivered, and I think Week 8 is going to be pretty good as well. Looking ahead to Week 8, we start on Friday night. We've got the Jacksonville Sharks going to the Tulsa Oilers. Kickoff is going to be at 7:05 Central. Tulsa is probably going to beat down on Jacksonville. Tulsa's defense is very good. And coming off of the 70-point explosion that they had this past weekend, Tulsa's probably going to be favored by 13, 14 points, somewhere in that range. Over-under is probably going to be maybe mid to high 80s, maybe like an 87.5, somewhere around there. So Tulsa has a great home field advantage as well, so they're probably gonna roll up on the Sharks. Next game we've got is the Green Bay Blizzard going to the Sioux Falls Storm. So Sioux Falls still looking for their first win of the season. Green Bay just doing Green Bay things with their defense and their running game. Green Bay is definitely going to be favored. With them being the road team, it's probably going to be like a 9.5, 10-point spread. But with how Green Bay's defense has been, and the limitations, we'll say, of Sioux Falls offense, probably going to be a very low scoring game. Over under maybe 79.5, 81.5, with Green Bay favored by 9-10 points. It'll be very interesting to see. I think I said this last week, but it'll be very interesting to see if Lorenzo Brown Jr. gets to start at quarterback, because that could provide a little spark to the offense. But we'll just have to see what we hear going into Friday night. Next up, we've got a rematch of a game we had last week, where Frisco is going to San Antonio on Saturday. That game is kicking off at 6:05 Central. It's going to be a very good game. The first game was in Frisco this past weekend. Next weekend it's going to be in San Antonio. So a nice little home and home, like a college basketball series. But yeah, this is going to be a really good game, and I think Frisco is going to have revenge on their mind, and Sam Castronova is going to continue to be Sam Castronova. So this game's probably going to have another total in the hundreds, probably a 102, 103, somewhere in that range. And you would have to imagine that Frisco is still going to be favored, even though San Antonio just beat them. Frisco's probably still going to be favored by 7.5, 7 points or so, just because they are the better team on paper. But fortunately for San Antonio, football is played on grass, not paper. Next game we've got on that same Saturday is going to be Quad City at Iowa. That game's kicking off at 7:05 Central. Quad City, their offense has been getting better and better every single week. Iowa, I guess the same, getting a little bit better week by week. This game's probably going to have a total in the high 80s, probably like an 89.5, maybe low 90s, 91.5. Quad City, I would imagine, is going to be favored heading in, maybe like a 4.5, 5.5 point spread. But this kind of lines up well for Iowa. Like I said, they've been getting incrementally better on offense, and if they can do some of the things we mentioned earlier, getting the ball out of Kyle King's hands very early and get the ball into the hands of some of their playmakers like Robert Washington, Iowa could make a little bit of noise here, but I really like Quad City's offense and what they've been doing and their distribution of the ball. PJ Vander has been incredible in the running game, and yeah, this is probably going to be a sneaky contender for game of the week here. And I say that that's going to be a sneaky contender for game of the week, not realizing that the very next game that I was going to talk about is going to be the actual game of the week, where the Vegas Nighthawks are going to go to Bay Area to play the Bay Area Panthers. That game's going to kick off at 8:05 Central. Undefeated versus undefeated. Winner is going to be at the top of the Western Conference. This is going to be a very, very fun game. Over-under is probably going to be mid to high 90s. Probably would lean under on that if that's the case. But Bay Area, you got to think that they're going to be favored here by at least 5.5, 6.5 points. Just given how Vegas looked human last week or this past weekend against Duke City. But on the other hand, Bay Area also looked a little human in the second half and just couldn't really get things going on offense to really seal off that game. So this is going to be a very good game. Hopefully Jerome Johnson returns to form and we get a little Jerome Johnson versus Daquan Neal in prime time on Saturday night. Last game of the weekend is going to be the Northern Arizona Wranglers at the San Diego Strikeforce. That game's going to be taking place on Sunday, 5:05 Central kickoff. Both these teams are heading into this game at an interesting crossroads for different reasons. Northern Arizona, they've been able to continue a winning streak and stack up some W's, but their offense has not looked great. On the opposite end, San Diego, last week their offense certainly didn't look great, but over the past few weeks, the offense has looked great, but they've dropped the past 2 games. They've got losses in each of the past 2 games. It was against Bay Area, so there is okay, I can see that, but this will be an interesting one to see if each team can get back on track with their offense and rebound from a rough couple of offensive weeks. So this game's probably going to have an over-under in the high 90s, maybe like a 97.5, 98.5, somewhere around there. And you would think that San Diego would be favored since they are the home team. So this is probably going to be the closest spread of the weekend, maybe like a 3.5. 2.5, somewhere in that range for San Diego. But this is gonna be a very good game, and glad that this game's going unopposed in the IFL because the San Diego broadcast, the presentation is spot on. Very, very good broadcast, very good production. So looking forward to seeing that one. That's a preview of week 8 in the IFL. It's going to be a good week. It always is. They always find ways, even the games that you don't think are going to be very good, find a way to be good in those situations. But next up, we've got an interview with Justin Rankin, running back for the Bay Area Panthers last year when they won the IFL championship. He was with the Frisco Fighters before that. We're going to get into Justin's journey through football and what he's got going on in the future. All right, joining me today, first interview in Off the Wall history. It's a big moment, Justin. I hope you can you're ready to rise to the occasion here. But multi-time All-IFL player, current player for the Edmonton Elks up in the CFL, starting camp up in a few weeks. It's running back Justin Rankin. Justin, thank you for joining me today.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it. Seriously.
Yeah, man. I really got into the IFL last season, beginning of last season, and I remember looking through the teams. I'm like, oh, Bay Area, they're like 1-15 the year before. They stink. And I was like, dude, quickly, it became quick that this team's legit. This team is nice. And you were one of those players that made it happen. So having you on as the first ever guest, that's huge. And I'm super appreciative of you hopping on here.
Of course. Yeah, they weren't too good, man. I think I was in Frisco that year that they went 1-15. We didn't get to see him. We didn't get to play him at all, but I don't even think I used to watch their games. It's just, again, it was a first year of team. You know what I mean? It's tough. The IFL is not an easy league to play in. So just like I think we talked about it a little bit, the 2 new teams that came from the NAL, it's a different game, man. You got to run the ball, stop the run.
Right.
It's a tough game. So
yeah, seeing some of those teams that transitioned, it's like, man, they have a lot of the same roster, but it's just a different style. It's just a different animal completely.
It definitely is, especially in the biggest thing, like you said, they got the same roster. A lot of those guys are used to playing the NAL type style football.
Right.
It's not bad football, but it's different. They're not worried about stopping the run for real. So when you got to come see a real running back, it's a little tough.
Yeah, it's not a big 300-pound guy who's acting like a running back. It's a real running back out there.
Yeah.
So starting off, I wanted to dive into your football journey a little bit and get to know how you got involved with the IFL.
Shoot, man, out of college, so I started at Kent State. I played there for 3 years. Transferred my senior year to Northwest Missouri State, powerhouse Division II school. Loved it, great school. After that, I had pro day and stuff, but I came out during the COVID year.
Mm,
So, kind of COVID kind of put a hold on a lot of stuff. I was talking to some teams, talking to some CFL teams at the time as well, but CFL season got canceled. NFL camps got canceled. NFL workouts got canceled. So, that kind of happened. After that, Malik Duncan actually, one of my guys. Yeah, that's my guy. He was
yeah,
playing in the IFL. He was trying to get me to play in the IFL for the past year, and I'm like, dude, I'm not coming to play indoor. Like, like I want to go outside. Like that's my goal. Like I'm not going to play indoor. But when the COVID happened, I was like, you know what? I just want to play football, man. Like
right.
I just want to play football. So he ended up with Coach Ross in North Dakota, and with the Bismarck Bucks. They hit me up, and I was like, whatever, man. I'm gonna come play.
Yeah.
So that kind of started my indoor journey, and it was rough, man. It was rough that first year in North Dakota. Like it took everything out of me. I actually it's crazy. A lot of people don't know, but I stopped playing. I went in GA at Kent instead of going to we made it to the playoffs, and I went and left in GA at Kent before the playoff game.
Wow.
And looking back on it, I wish I would have stayed, but man, the whole indoor thing was rough for me.
Hmm.
Mentally, I was not locked in.
Yeah.
But I'm grateful for the opportunity out there. I'm grateful for Coach Ross, grateful for Coach Miller. They really believed in my capabilities and my abilities, and they allowed me to come play for them. So that was dope, man. But North Dakota was a rough time for me.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding, man. And what was that your first exposure? Like, did you know about indoor and arena football growing up, or was it
I knew
like
nothing
after
about it.
after college? Okay.
Nothing about it. I've heard of the Gladiators, when the arena football was around.
Yeah.
I never been to a game. I never looked into it. I just heard of them. They practiced down the street from kind of where I live. So like I just kind of knew of them, but I never even thought about arena football. And then obviously I kind of knew about it because Malik Duncan was playing in it. But again, I never watched any of his games. I was in college still. I was focused on that. So I had no idea what this arena football was. I walk in, the North Dakota. I'm like, this 50-yard field. At practice, they put the little bags up so we can
Uh-huh.
practice with. Man, it was crazy. And I actually came in with Mike Kerrigan. He plays for the Sugar Skulls now.
Yeah.
So we were there together and we played at Kent together. So it made it a little easier, but we were like, dude, what is this? This is different. This is not football.
Yeah, right.
But we took it for what it was, and we were a young team. We had JT Stokes, Mike Kerrigan, Raheem Harvey, and I think we went through 7 different quarterbacks that year.
Sheesh.
Yeah, but we made the best of it, man. Like we were a really good rookie team. The Bismarck, they were just like the Panthers. They were one of the worst organizations, in indoor, and we came and kind of turned the organization around. Took them to their first playoff berth, I think, in history.
Nice.
So it was a good experience. It was fun, but I don't even think we realized what we were doing.
Right.
We were just taking it day by day, trying to get back outside, playing football. Like we didn't even realize like what was going on. We had no idea what we were doing for real. Like if I knew what I knew now in the indoor game and I could go to Bismarck again and play that first year, it would be completely different.
Right.
But man, I'm grateful for it. It was lessons learned, and I'm glad that I had to go through those tribulations.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm always interested to hear about the transition from the outdoor game to the indoor game. It sounds like it was a bit of a learning curve for
Yeah.
you and your boys in Bismarck. But something that I heard in an interview recently was you don't have to be fast, but you have to play fast to be successful in the IFL. What was one of the biggest on the field transitions you had to make to the indoor
Yeah.
game?
Man, that's a great whoever said that, that's
I know. As soon
hammer
as
on
you
the
said that, I was like, write
nail.
that down. That's good.
Yeah, that's the hammer on the nail. Yeah, that's true because everybody's fast in the indoor. I mean, it's 50-yard field. If you're slow on the 50-yard field, like it's something else that you need to work on, man. Like we got a different problem. So everybody's fast. I mean, like you said, like you don't got to be fast, but you got to play fast. And I think the biggest transition for me was really just the offensive line play. You know, having the three offensive linemen was a little different.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the holes were different. Where you were hitting the holes were different. And you know, again, a lot of people like, you know, they see when I cut back, they're like, oh man, you cutting it back all the way across the field. But it's like an outdoor, I'm hitting the backside, you know, C gap.
Right. Yeah.
Like I'm really just hitting the backside. If we run a zone, I'm just bending it back to the backside. Like that's a regular cutback. Just it looks different because there's only
Yeah.
three offensive linemen, you know. But it took me a while to start to kind of really understand how indoor was being played. You know, I wasn't really reading
Mm-hmm.
the rule book. Shoot, there were still some rules last year that I had no idea, you know, that were even in the game.
Yeah. Right.
I just kind of was learning as I was going. But I think that the biggest transition for me was the offensive line play and kind of getting the blocking scheme down because it's different. You know, you don't really have a lot of double teams. It's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of more big on big. You know, you're not really reaching to the backer to the alley player. There's not a lot of teams that do that. You know, it's tough. You got to find really good offensive linemen that can do that. But I mean, man, it's 50 yards.
Yeah. Right.
You know, it's 50 yards. Like when I tell people they're like, is it? I'm like, dude, it's 50 yards. Like, and you'll see real fast that it's 50
Uh-huh.
yards. Like you're gonna be running a post, you're gonna feel that wall, you either gonna go over the wall or you're gonna stop. Like
Mm-hmm.
I've seen both. I've seen some people like go up and then come back
Yeah.
down, and I've seen other people just go get it. You know, it's you break the barrier one way or another. You know, you either get cut or you're gonna go over the wall.
Right. Yeah. And it seems like with the O line, it's like you said, it's lots of one-on-one with the O
Yeah.
line versus the D line. And while in the outdoor game, you might have a numbers advantage, like a 5-on-4 on some plays. It's like,
Yep.
nope, nope, it's
There's
one
no,
on it's
yeah, it's
one-on-one
one on
across the
one.
board.
You know, and it's tough. But I love it though because it shows coaches like I can win my one on ones. You know,
Right.
like I think that's why I like indoor a lot is because it's me and the linebacker now. You know, like I want to if you want to put film out, this is perfect to show coaches that you can make somebody miss and go score. You
Right.
know, it's you versus the linebacker. Everybody else is man on man. You know, so that's what, like you said, there's no numbers game. It can
Mm-hmm.
be, but it's tough. It's tough and rare that you see a real numbers game in indoor. You know, some coaches do it. There are some coaches that are really good at manipulating the defense, but for the most part, man, like you said, it's one imano. It's
Right.
me and you, man. Like who's gonna
Yeah.
win?
Yeah. On the flip side of that, I don't think a lot of people understand some of the off the field things that
Mhm.
people in the IFL got to deal with. Like for you specifically, you went from Bismarck to Frisco to the Bay Area, and now you're heading up to Edmonton. What are some of the challenges off the field that fans or people watching the game may not realize?
Yeah, there are it's a lot that goes into it. Again, like indoor is professional, but I think a lot of people don't understand that. Like obviously, we don't have the funds that you know, the NFL, the UFL, like some of these
Hmm.
other leagues have. And that's just the reality of the situation. Some organizations, you know, are living better than other organizations.
Yeah.
And that's something that you just kind of learn and you kind of got to live with. I think indoor, I compare it when I talk to people, it's like JUCO. You know, it's like you're going through junior college. Because sometimes you might stay in a hotel. Sometimes you might be in a hotel the whole year. Sometimes you're going to be in an apartment. You know, sometimes you know the bus that picks you up for practice might break down. You know, if you don't have your car, like that's what you rely on. That's just
Yeah.
it's kind of going with the flow. You know, and you kind of got to just go with the flow and kind of block out all those distractions and continue to work, continue to put the grind in and play football because at the end of the day, that's what you're there for. You
Yeah.
know, you're not there for to live in, you know, a nice house. You're not there to live in a nice apartment. You're not there to live like you're not there for any of that stuff. You are there to play football and try to get back outside. If that's your
Yeah.
goal, you don't care about nothing else. You
Right.
know, in the moment that it kind of like that clicked with me is when I was like, oh man, like I can really just play football. Like I'm playing professional football.
Hmm.
I'm gonna take advantage of this. You know, but you know, on the flip side of that, there are a lot of great things that some organizations do. You know, Frisco, amazing organization that you know they do a lot of stuff with their players, a lot of stuff with the community, a lot of stuff you know reaching out to the community, having the guys you know go out hand tickets, stuff like that, man. And I love seeing that. You know, they go talk to some of the elementary schools,
Yeah.
just things of that nature, and you know that's a huge part that allows it to still feel you know professional. Like you know, there's people that are fans of indoor that look up to, you know, indoor football players, and it's awesome. So on the flip side of things, there are the good things. But
Yeah.
to me, every league has their bad. I've heard bad about the UFL. I've heard bad about CFL. I've heard bad about every league.
Right.
So
Yeah.
if you can block out those distractions and just play football, which is what you're there for,
Exactly. Yeah.
then you'll be all right.
Yeah, it's nothing but respect for all the players that go out there,
Yeah.
and like you said, they're chasing that dream to get to the next level, whether that's in the UFL, in the CFL, up to the NFL. Like people are getting after it, and it's like when you kind of put it in perspective like that, it's like, man, these guys are getting after it, and they're doing
Yeah.
what they love, hoping to get to the next level. So
Hmm.
nothing but respect
Yeah,
there.
it's definitely dope. I mean, shoot, we had a situation last year, in the Bay where we lost our locker room, and we're getting dressed out on the field, and it's just
Wow.
like we're just like it is what it is. Like, I
Hmm.
mean, we won a championship, and we were getting dressed on the field every day,
Right.
and a lot of people don't even know that. They're like they thinking it's all sweet. Man, we taking our pads home every day,
Right.
coming in the field, getting dressed in the field in the bathroom right there. So it just, go with the punches and listen, let's play football, man. It is what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, speaking of Bay Area, like I said, looking at the team from 2022, I was like, man, this team kind of stinks. But you guys obviously turned it around and ended up winning a championship last year. But speaking on some of the other teams you've been on, those teams also had talent, but something just seemed different with Bay Area. Um, was was there a certain moment where everything just kind of clicked, or was it just like was it a combination of talent, coaching staff, and everything just falling into place perfectly?
Yeah, it was again, we have great coaches. If
Hmm.
anybody looks at that team, like that's one of the first things they're gonna say is like, I mean, you got right now it's Coach Keith and Dixie Wooten. Like there's two of the best coaches in indoor. So, shout out to them. They're amazing. But to me, like I felt it, it's, when we was in camp, I'm watching how hard like everybody was practicing, and not like to downplay how hard other guys were practicing on other teams, but it
Hmm.
was different. Like it was different. The intensity every single day was like, I mean, it was top tier. It felt like we was in college. That's what I could compare it to. Like it was college. Like every day you're going hard every single day,
Yeah.
and when adversity was hitting, I saw how the guys were reacting. Like we were a very close knit team. Like we were always together. We was always doing cookouts. We were always watching film together. And I knew from there. I'm like, oh yeah, this is the team. Like we gonna make it all the way. Even with some of the early losses, like I was never even worried. I'm like, man, this team
Hmm.
is like they're locked in. Like guys are really locked in. They're showing up
Yeah.
every day and treating this, like pros. And I've been in a couple of other teams where I mean, just straight up, guys weren't treating it like pros. They weren't going about their business. They weren't handling their business like pros. They was worried about too many outside stuff. And I think that's kind of where, we fell short a little bit in Frisco that year. That was a great team. That was one of the
Hmm.
talent wise, that might have been the
Yeah.
best team that I've been on. I mean,
Uh-huh.
there were some guys on there, it just, personally, I felt like a lot of guys didn't handle it like pros.
Hmm.
That's just the reality of it. And I think that's where the Bay team was different. It was guys coming in, handling a business, and they wanted to win. Like it
Yeah.
wasn't it wasn't a whole bunch of individuals playing football. Like they wanted to win, whether they was special teams, whether it was they had to go and beat a long snapper. I mean, shoot, JT Stokes was a long snapper for us.
Hmm.
Like he's scoring touchdowns, and then he got to go practice long snap. Like he
Right.
got to go
Yeah.
long snap. So it's like they didn't care. There was no complaining. Like, man, whatever we got to do to win, we'll do it.
Right.
So that was kind of probably the biggest difference between some of the other teams, that I was on.
Yeah. Everyone's got to buy in, right? And it
Yeah,
seems like everyone did.
that's the thing. That's the key,
Yeah.
man. And that's the key. You got to buy in. You got to have your leaders leading, and they got to be holding guys accountable.
Yeah, for sure. We talked about this a little bit ago. I think it was when you were streaming some of the IFL games on Twitch, which that was a ton of fun. Everyone should go follow you on there.
Yeah, yeah.
JRank11 on Twitch. I remember
Come on.
I was in the chat bot or the chat room, and we were
Yeah.
going back and forth watching the games, and I learned a little bit about the indoor game and some things I didn't know. You were breaking some things down. I'm like, all right, I
Yeah.
see where some of the vision is now. But something we talked about is about the growth of the indoor game and the
Mhm.
arena game and where it goes from here. I touched on it a few episodes back on Off the Wall. But I personally don't think these leagues are doing nearly enough to market the players. I know you feel the same.
Yeah.
And if you market the players better, you in turn are marketing the team, marketing the league, and ultimately the brand of what we're
Everything.
doing here
Yep.
gets elevated by doing some of these small things. So I'm really interested to hear it from a player's perspective. What are some things you think the leagues and teams are doing well currently, but what are
Mm.
some things that you think they could do a little bit better in terms of marketing players and in turn themselves?
I think they have come a long way since I first started. You know, I was there 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That's my first year, and since then, like, I mean, the indoor football page just in general looks 10 times better night and day.
Right.
You know, a lot of the marketing they are doing, like, I want to give them props. They are doing a great job.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for me, the stuff that could be better, it comes more so with the individual teams because obviously every team has their own media department, every team has
Yeah.
their own, marketing department and stuff like that. And I feel as if the owners and the teams would invest more into those areas, it would sell more tickets, it would bring more people watching indoor football in general. I
Right.
think we mentioned it what Frisco. Again, Frisco does a great
Mm-hmm.
job.
Yeah.
Like their social media is amazing. You know, it looks and to me it's crazy because the NFL, the UFL, the CFL, they have the blueprint down.
Mm-hmm.
Like you see it on social
Yeah.
media, like you see what works. And social media is a copycat industry. You find the people that are doing well on
Yep.
social media and do what they do.
You
So
literally hop on trends, right? Like
you hop on
yes,
trends.
yeah, yeah,
What's the trend? And I think that's what Frisco does well is
yeah.
as soon as they see a trend, they're on it. The sketch, the what's up, brother deal,
Mm-hmm.
they did it right away,
Yeah.
so they do a good job at it. I would like to see a lot of other teams do better as well. But like you touched on the brands, like some of these players have their own brand.
Yeah.
They have their own personal brand, their name and likeness. And I feel as if it falls down on the players and the organizations. The players need to understand that like you are a professional in your industry, you can partner with these organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And the organizations, they need to understand like these players are grown men and players who have a brand. You can partner with the brand of that player and
Yeah.
work together. Like, like we are coworkers.
Mm-hmm.
Let's work together. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're cutting my check. Yeah, you're above me, but like we're coworkers. Like,
Right.
let's work together to bring fans into the stands, because that's going to make all of us look better. It's going to
Yeah.
help us get more exposure. And I think, obviously you doing that, it's going to bring more guys like you that are watching football,
Yeah.
the indoor football game, and want to like get the indoor football name out, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that would help a lot. I think shoot, if I'm the indoor league, I'm partnering with you. I'm partnering with you, and I'm hey, look, we want to partner with you. Like you can
Yeah.
use our name and likeness, help us get the indoor football, the name out. But I don't know if they're not worried about it. I don't know if they're not focused on it. But personally, I think they should. I think that should be the main thing that they should focus on because this is a social media era
Yeah.
and take advantage of it before it's gone.
Man, put me on, man. You know some
Hey,
people. Come on.
hey, I'll try. I've been telling them like y'all got to watch this guy. Like this guy is he's helped anything to help indoor football
Yes.
get exposure. Like I'm all for it. Like I'm a believer in what the indoor football league is doing, and
Yeah.
I would like it. Obviously, there's certain things I would like to see be a little more professional.
Mm-hmm.
Certain things I would like to see be better. The streams, the cameras, like all
Yeah.
that stuff. All that stuff comes into play. Like they need to invest more into that. Certain like every team should have good turf. Every team should have good cameras,
Yep.
good camera quality. San Diego is doing it perfect. Let's follow San
Immaculate.
Diego.
It looks so good.
And it's like, like you see these teams that are doing it. Why are we not falling in suit? Why are we not? Let's keep up with San Diego.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
don't know.
It's a big financial investment, but
Yeah,
like it pays dividends in the final product. Like you look at San Diego versus I'll just come out and say you look like a Duke City broadcast. It is
yeah,
night and day. You're talking
night and
about
day.
turf. You're talking about camera quality. You're talking production quality.
Yeah,
It's like it doesn't feel like I'm watching the same sport at times.
not at
Like
all.
San Diego feels like I'm stepping foot in a movie and like I'm just in it. But
Yep.
then like a Duke City broadcast, it's like I kind of feel like I shouldn't be watching this. Like I kind of feel like I'm looking through like a security cam, like I'm
What's
sneaking
going on
in
here?
here, like I'm hacking into this. Like I shouldn't be seeing this. But yeah, it's just like, man, if the floor is raised
Yeah,
and they set a standard for these things, I think every single team would benefit from it.
100%.
And to your point, the league has a responsibility to help the teams, but the teams also got to help themselves at a certain point.
They got to be
Like,
willing to. They got to be willing to do
yeah,
it.
yeah,
And it's crazy because I used to, man, I used to try to like tell the front office of the Bay Area team all the time, like, man, like, look, here's some stuff we can do. Here's
hmm
stuff that I see on social media because I like making content,
yeah,
workout content and stuff like that. So I'm keeping up with like the trends, and I'm trying to keep up with what's going on. I'm looking at it, I'm watching it, and I'm like, man, this is what's working right now. Like, we should do
right,
this, like we should do that. And who does the in Nas does like the in game mic'd up.
yep,
Like,
yeah,
that's stuff that's
yeah,
cool. The indoor game is so different that like you can do a lot of different things. So it's like, why not take advantage of like the in-game mic'd ups, the cameraman that's on the football field following the players around. Like, let's take
right,
advantage of those things. Like, and to me, that gets a lot of good content out. Like that San Diego, they got fire content. Like, it looks amazing.
yeah,
Like you said, Duke City. There's a reason why Duke City gets 10 people in the stands and San Diego gets a lot more.
yeah,
So again, all those things sell tickets.
yeah,
And
for
I
sure.
think like you said, if they would follow suit to the ones that look professional, and if I'm Mr. Tyron, I'm telling these teams like, hey, look, you got till next year to figure this out.
Yeah,
You got it next year. You got to figure this out.
yeah, because you kind of got to think about it. Like, what if someone's first viewing experience never watched the Indoor Football League before?
Yep.
You get two people. One person watches a San Diego broadcast. They're going to be blown away. But if that
Mm-hmm.
first person watches watches Duke City, we'll just keep using them as an
Turn
example.
it off.
They may not be back. Like they may not last the quarter. Like
Yep.
it's like, man, you got to be thinking about first impressions that you're making on somebody who's never watched the game, who's never
Yeah.
watched the league before. You want to hook them and you want them to stick around and
Seriously.
eventually start a podcast and interview former running
Yeah.
backs in the league, right? So
Seriously though, like it's crazy. I mean, that's how I feel about it. I feel the same way that everything you're saying, you're hitting it on the head
yeah,
because I don't know. They definitely got to figure that out. If I'm a first time watcher, like you said, I'm watching Duke City, I'm turning it off.
yeah,
Shoot,
right.
I
It's tough,
played and I don't even want to watch it. I'm like,
right?
man, I gotta watch this Duke City game. Like, are they at Duke City? I'm not
Yeah,
watching.
right. Yeah, it's tough. But yeah, there is just so much room for growth with the
Yeah.
sport and the league, and it can get so much bigger and better. Um, the teams, the leagues, they just got to help themselves, and
Mm,
the players, like you said, they got to buy in to an extent
yeah.
too. And if
They're
everyone just
definitely
buys in a little bit more,
they're definitely going in the right direction, but
yeah,
there could be a big leap. Like,
of
it's like
course,
they're taking baby steps, like where it could, bro, y'all could take this big leap like right now if y'all would
right,
just
yeah,
if everybody would just get on the same page. But I think, and I could be wrong. I'm not in the front offices, but I feel like all the organizations obviously are just competing against each other. When
right,
it's like, I get it, but like, y'all should really just be helping each other
hmm,
because it's just gonna help everybody. Like, yeah, we're
yeah,
competing, but at the same time, like, let's help each other because we're all in this for the same reason.
yeah. You should compete on the field, but be
Yeah,
coworkers off the field. Like that should be
100%,
the mindset.
100%.
Um, I'm gonna take a slight detour here, and
Yep.
I'm gonna pivot. I'm gonna say one word: Maction. Me and my boys, we love college football, and we're obsessed with some midweek Maction. What was your experience like at Kent State?
Yeah, that's wild. We were just talking about Max at training the other day. Um, it's different. It's different.
Yeah.
Like playing on a Tuesday or a Thursday, it throws the whole week off. You still got to go to class, which is the
Hmm.
crazy part. Like, if you got a class before noon, like, you're going to that class. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Brutal.
so it's tough. Like, and then the next day, like, you're going to class again, a full
Uh-huh.
class schedule right after a game. You're tired, sore. But I love Maction because it's the only game on TV.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I mean, if you like watching football, like if it's just someone at home that loves watching football and they just want to watch a football game on a Tuesday, Thursday night, there's going to be
Right.
at least two games on that are playing,
Of course.
and it's only those games. So it's like, well, shoot, if I can't watch, Alabama, that's my favorite team. I'm gonna watch Kent State play Toledo. Like, why
Right.
not?
Yeah.
So, Maction was fun. It was fun. It was just hard to. It was very hard to like transition into the weeks, and
Right.
you're playing at night. You're playing at 6 p.m., 5 p.m. sometimes, 7 p.m. under the lights, which was dope. But
Mm-hmm.
when you get used to playing at noon on a Saturday,
Right. Yeah.
and you got to go play at 7 p.m., you're like, oh my gosh, tired, exhausted. So it was
Right.
fun. Maction was a man. That was fun. The MAC is one of my favorite conferences to watch.
Same. And it's not the warmest region either. So
Nope.
I bet there were some chilly games you played in.
It was freezing, and for some odd reason, like Kent Stadium, it just funneled wind in. Like it was just so
Oh man.
windy. Like oh, it was awful, but I mean it was fun. Like
Yeah.
any given week, I mean, you could win, you could lose. Like one year Toledo's good, the next year they suck. One year, like
Seriously.
it's crazy. Like the MAC is one of my favorite conferences.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about the MAC in particular is what you just said. In
Yeah.
the SEC, Alabama, Georgia is going to run things every single year. The MAC,
Hmm.
it's a toss up. Like
Every
Western
year.
Michigan, maybe good last year. Next year, they could be in the gutter. Like
Yep. I
you
remember
just
they
don't
was
know.
top 25 to 1 year. 2 years later, they were like, "Who's Western Michigan?"
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like man,
It's
you just
crazy,
never know.
but I love it. I mean, it's like it's some, and people kind of sleep on the MAC. Like, there's some guys that come out of the MAC.
Right.
Shoot, some of the best players in the NFL, like they were all from the MAC.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And people kind of sleep on the MAC. Like, it's some players in the MAC, man.
Yeah. They're all battle tested from Tuesday games and Wednesday
Yep.
classes. That's right.
Seriously, you got to wake up
Yeah.
on a Tuesday, go to class, go to meetings, play the
Brutal.
game. Nuts.
Just tough.
Yeah.
Um, so last question I got here, it's a two-parter. So who was the best athlete you ever played with, and who was the best player you ever played with? The answer can be the same, but what I found is that oftentimes it's usually two very
Yeah.
different answers.
The best athlete I've played with, man, I would have to say TJ Edwards.
Okay.
Yeah, TJ is. I mean, he's a freak. Like he's a freak. Watching him play, like you just
Yeah.
like every play, you're like, man, this dude could do something crazy. I mean,
Right.
he's insane. His footwork is just everything. Like I love watching TJ play. He's a freak of nature.
Yeah.
The best player I ever played with. Oh man,
I'll buy
go
you some
ahead.
time real quick. So regarding TJ, he's one of the few players in any league across any level where like he'll have the ball in his own five, he'll tuck it and run, and there's a little piece of you that like he could rip a 45 yarder right now.
Yeah,
This could be a touchdown. And like any other player, you're like, if he gains five, he's lucky.
he's
But that's
lucky.
the type of athlete he
Yeah,
is, right?
seriously. Yeah, TJ, you're like, dude, like you might take this the whole field, like
Yeah.
just on a broken play,
Yeah,
break
exactly.
three
Yeah.
tackles, make four dudes
Uh-huh.
miss. Like, yeah, TJ's nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, player wise, it'd have to be TJ or Dalton.
Hmm.
TJ or Dalton, man, they're some of the best players I've ever been around. Like, I mean, Dalton just he's always gonna make the right play.
Right.
Like, and he's a very smart QB. He's very protective of the football, which you love in a quarterback,
Yeah.
and he's always gonna make the right play. And yeah, JT Stokes though, I'll tell
Uh-huh.
you what, man,
Yeah.
JT Stokes is a ball player. JT Stokes would be a kickoff, kick return. Like
Right.
JT Stokes might be one of the best players I've ever played with. Like, yeah, seriously, man. Like he's very versatile. He blocks. Yeah, he's the best player I've ever
He's a
played with.
long snapper.
Yeah, he's a long. I mean, he does everything. Like he's a true definition of a football player. Like
Yeah.
JT Stokes is not a wide receiver. Like he's a football player. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? He's a football
Yeah.
player. He's a guy that loves to win. And I mean, again, like I've seen the dude be on kick return and like pancake people. I've seen him. I was watching his highlight the other day, and like it's just 2 minutes of him pancaking guys on blocks, and I'm like, dude, like you won't find another receiver in the
Yeah.
IFL today that's doing that right now. Like,
Right.
I guarantee you won't. Like in JT Stokes, man, like he does it everything. He jet sweeps, like he's gonna run a post. He's gonna
Yeah.
cook you on the post. He'll take a jet sweep to the crib. I mean, he's a guy. That's the best player I've ever played with.
Okay.
Yeah, he's the best football player I've been around, hands down.
Awesome. Good answer. I'm sure.
Yeah,
I'm sure he'll
heck
love to
yeah.
hear that. Well, that's all I got for you, Justin. I really appreciate you hopping
Of
on
course.
and joining me. Where can people follow along your journey in the CFL? I know you're all across all socials.
Yeah, shoot. I'm on social media. I got Instagram. You can follow me at I think I changed my Instagram name, so I'm gonna let y'all know really quick.
Okay.
It's yeah, it's just underscore J rank. TikTok J rank 11. The YouTube coming soon.
Nice.
Just stay tuned. That's just
Yeah.
J rank 11 as well.
Cool.
But yeah, man, y'all follow me on Instagram, follow me on TikTok. We leave
Yeah.
May 6th on Monday. So I'll kind of be a little blackout period on social
Yeah, of
media
course. Of course.
because of camp, but
Yeah.
once that's over, we'll kind of be more active. So I appreciate you having me, man. Seriously, you
Yeah.
got you got to get some other guys on here, man.
Dude, you're the first domino. I'm
Yeah, I love
sure
it.
yeah, we'll break the seal and we'll get some other folks on here.
Heck
But
yeah, heck
yeah,
yeah.
regarding your social, man, some of your workout videos you put, I'm like, man, I gotta bust out 25 real quick. Like like you getting me fired up. I'm like, man, I
Yeah, I
gotta I
love
gotta
it.
keep up with at
I
least
just
a
want
fraction
to
of what he's
motivate
doing.
people. I want to make
Yeah,
people great, man. That's it.
yeah,
Make people great. That's all. That's all the goal is. It ain't about
for
me.
sure.
I mean, it's
Right.
about
Yeah.
everybody else.
Yeah, definitely. Well, best of luck with everything you got going on in the CFL this season, and I'm sure we'll be in touch.
Heck yeah, man. I appreciate it. Seriously, thank you.
Big thank you to Justin Rankin again for joining the show today, being the first ever interview on Off the Wall. I feel like it went pretty well. He's a busy man with him getting ready for the CFL right around the corner with training camp starting, and he didn't have to take the time to join and talk with us today, but he did anyway, just because he loves the indoor game and wants to see it grow, just like we do here. So go follow Justin, follow his journey on his next steps of his football career. You can follow him on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitch. Links to each of those will be in the description. If you're listening on podcasts, it will be in the description. And I guess if you're watching on YouTube, it will also be in the description. So go give him a follow and let him know you heard him on Off the Wall. So last but not least, we had week 1 of AFL 3.0 this past weekend. There was some highs and there were certainly some lows. And I figured the best way to go about detailing the weekend of games and honestly some of the stuff leading up to the weekend of games is to separate it into the good, the bad, and the ugly. There was plenty of each, and I don't want it to seem like it was all bad or all ugly. The ugly parts were fewer than the rest, but they were big. Like this, there were some very, very ugly parts here, but there was plenty of good that happened in week 1 as well. So starting off with the good, Orlando, Albany. This game was supposed to be the triumphant return of the AFL on the NFL network, but the week leading up to the kickoff of the weekend, suddenly it wasn't listed there. And they're very vague on what caused it or what the reason was. It was technical issues. I'm using air quotes if you're listening. Technical issues beyond our control. Who knows what that means? If it's a limitation on the AFL side, if it was a quick little cord pull by the NFL, just because of things and stuff that they were hearing. Who knows? Nobody knows. Hopefully, we'll get some clarity on that this week. There are some games scheduled to be on the NFL Network as soon as Thursday, so we'll see how that goes. But Orlando Albany was a very, very good game, and it's a huge missed opportunity that this wasn't on the NFL Network. This game from start to finish was exciting. It was a thrilling watch between two legacy franchises of the AFL that were making their comeback. And Orlando stormed off to they scored 45 points in the first half, which is a pretty high number in any league, any indoor league, arena league. And Albany ended up coming back and winning the game 62-59 in overtime. Back and forth game all throughout. Or it looked like Orlando was going to walk away with this. Albany clawed back and rose from the ashes like a phoenix. Funny how that works when they're the Firebirds, right? But they came roaring back and they won. Unfortunately, we don't have an official box score to look at in terms of like this person had this many touchdowns, this person had this many touchdowns. Drew Powell, quarterback for the Orlando Predators, looked great all throughout the game. He had a couple costly turnovers towards the end, but he looked great all throughout. He's going to be a problem for the Predators all season long in a good way. I mean, problem in a good way. Like, not a problem, but a problem. Just go with it. So on the other end, though, Albany looked pretty good on offense in the second half once they got settled in. But again, we don't have box scores to really lean on. So can't really point to specifics on this person had this many catches, this many yards. Hopefully we will next week, but Orlando Albany as a whole was a very good game. So you can run that back and watch it on the Vyre network, VYRE network. It's an app on Roku, and you can also pull it up on like virenetwork.com. I don't know if that's the website. Just Google Vyre Network and it'll come up. Should be able to run it back. And it was a really good game, and it was a really good relaunch of the league. And I just wish that it was on NFL Network, because of all the games that happened this weekend, that was the one that you want to show, like, hey, the AFL is back. And it's just a shame that it couldn't get aired. Another good was the Southwest Kansas versus the Salina game. I was a little skeptical about having 3 teams from Kansas, 3 out of your 16 teams being in the state of Kansas with this relaunch. And I got to be honest, the Southwest Kansas and Salina game was a very, very good game. Salina jumped out to a pretty big lead, but Southwest Kansas was able to storm back and make it a game. Salina ended up holding on. They won 43-40, but this was a sneaky good game. If you were watching it and listening to it, the audio was about 5 seconds ahead of the video. So that was unideal, but there were broadcast issues all across the league. So that's something that the league and each individual team is going to have to get sorted out. But me personally, that I had that game on mute while I was watching some IFL games along at the same time. So I had the volume on different ones. So it was a good viewing experience. Visually, it was very, very nice. It was smooth, unlike some of the other games that were happening all throughout the weekend in the AFL. It's just the audio was way off. So if they can get that solved, man, Salina's going to have a very good viewing experience. They have a very good team. And again, we don't have an official box score for them, so we can't dive too far into specifics, but both of those teams are going to be super exciting to watch. And they through 1 week, they proved me wrong about having multiple teams in Kansas, because it looks like both teams are going to be contenders in their respective division. And if they can keep up how they played this past weekend, they can have a shot to make the playoffs and maybe go a little bit further than that. So while there was some good, unfortunately, there was also some bad. So we're going from the good to the bad, and we'll get to the ugly. But the bad, man, Georgia Force and the Wichita Regulators, yikes. The Force, they just got blasted by West Texas. It looked like the Force maybe had their first practice like a week before the game, and they were still going through the motions and figuring things out. And honestly, this game could have been much worse. West Texas ended up winning 51-28, but West Texas clearly took their foot off the gas pedal in the second half. And this could have been a 60 burger, possibly a 70-point game for the West Texas Desert Hawks. And I think they were just content with how the game was going. They were like, all right, run it out. Let's move on to next week. So West Texas looks very, very good, but it's one of those things where, do they look that good, or is Georgia just that bad? On the broadcast, on that specific broadcast too, the announcers were figuring out the rules as the game was going on. Like there was a rouge that happened, which is when the kickoff goes into the end zone and the returner can't get it out of the end zone, basically a touchback in the NFL or college. That's called a rouge, where the kicking team gets 1 point. So that happened in the game, and the announcers were yelling, "That's a safety. That's 2 points, 2 points," when it clearly wasn't. So it was just little stuff like that, where it's like if that was your first game that you were watching, you were very confused by what the announcers were saying versus what was actually happening on the field. So it's something where it's like everybody's got to do better, and it's only week 1. I get that, and people will smooth things out, but it was a tough listen as a more savvy arena football fan, like knowing some of the nuances of the game. It's like, man, guys, come on, get this right, please. But yeah, to put a bow on this, Georgia Force, they look bad, and it looks like they're going to have nothing but road games this year. So they're going to be one where, if they look anything like they did this first week against any other team the rest of the season, it's gonna be rough. It's gonna be very, very rough for them. And on the Wichita side of things, they were just outclassed by Billings from the jump. Billings had a pretty good broadcast, pretty good home arena atmosphere from what it looked like, which makes sense. They've been around for as some sort of iteration of the franchise for the greater part of 12, 13 years, with some gaps in between. But they already have an established presence in the Billings area. So to see them revive it and have a pretty good game 1 atmosphere is good to see. But again, Wichita also looked outclassed from the jump heading into the season. Their roster didn't look as good as some of the other ones. It was something where it's like, man, just on paper, they don't have a ton of IFL experience. They don't have a ton of outdoor experience, and the names weren't hopping off the page like some of the rosters on some of the other teams were. So going into this, the thought was Billings is probably going to put a beat down on them, and I think I might have said that either in a blog or on the last episode, and they did. Billings ended up winning this game 66-26, so a 40-point victory. And at one point, it wasn't even that close. I think right before halftime, it was 35-6. And it just looked like an SEC school versus like an FCS school, one of those cupcake games that you'd see Georgia or Alabama play in week 9, be like Alabama versus, UT Martin or something. It's like, man, what are we doing here? Like these teams don't even belong on the same field, and these teams are in the same league. So it was a tough watch, but if you're a Billings fan, it was a fun one. Up next, we got Minnesota, Nashville. Now, the reason why I put this in the bad was because there was no broadcast of it. Of all the games that were broadcast, eight games took place this weekend. 6 of them were broadcast. For some reason, Minnesota, Nashville was not one of them. All week, the AFL social media accounts were hyping up how beautiful the Nashville Cats home arena at the Nashville Municipal Auditorium looked. It looks pretty good, all things considered. The blue, black, and yellow that they had all throughout the arena, the everything looked great, but there was no broadcast. So it's like they were hyping this up all week just to not see anything, and the only clips we were seeing were cell phone videos from people that were sitting in the front row or sitting in the end zone or third row, or from the teams themselves, of clips that they uploaded the next day. So there was no way to check the score of the game. It was very word of mouth of like, hey, this person's friend is at the game. They said it's 25-0 right now, or 28-0 right now. So you kind of had to take their word for it. So that was a little upsetting. And Minnesota, they should have gotten shut out. Nashville ended up winning this game 47-12, but Minnesota lucked out on a couple of lucky plays to score late in the game to avoid the shutout, which would have been very, very bad for them. Yeah, it's just bad because Nashville is one of the legacy franchises, just like Albany and Orlando. They've been hyping this up for so long, and there's not even an online broadcast. Like, you're telling me, no offense to Salina, Kansas, but Salina, Kansas can have a broadcast, but Nashville, Tennessee cannot. You're telling me Billings, Montana can have a broadcast, but Nashville cannot. It's just a big miss on the team's part and a big miss on the league's part. I don't know what the reason was, but if you're going to hype something up like this, especially in Nashville, with it being one of those core markets that they're focusing on, huge missed opportunity by the league here. Now, last part of the bad here is going to be Iowa versus Rapid City. And it's another one where I don't know if Iowa is that good or is just Rapid City that bad. It was a pretty rough broadcast. It took place in Rapid City, South Dakota. The red field looked kind of cool on it, but overall, it just looked mediocre at best at times. And it sounds like I'm nitpicking. I promise I'm trying not to, but you just got to have a certain standard in this league, where in the AFL you're claiming to be the premier indoor and arena football league. There has to be a standard for the broadcast at some point, at some level. And I feel like the league has to set a floor and say, like, hey, these are the minimum expectations. You have to meet these if you're going to be in this league. And Rapid City was a broadcast where I was like, man, it looked like somebody was drawing the graphics with a crayon and updating the graphics with a 9-year-old's drawing of what the scorecard or score bug would look like. So it was just a very, very rough viewing experience on the stream itself. It looked like a pretty fun environment. It looked like a pretty fun atmosphere that they're building here. So big shout out to them for putting something together and getting some people there for the big re-debut of arena football, specifically in Rapid City. But again, no official box score. So unless you were very savvy with, all right, number 9 caught that for 8 yards, number 12 threw that pass for 15 yards, and writing it down as you were going, you really have no clear indication of what actually happened with this. So across the board, hopefully we'll see that next week. Hopefully there's some level of expectation there from the league level as well, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, it was a bad broadcast, and I don't know if Iowa was that good or Rapid City was that bad. Iowa looked tremendous on offense and defense. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see Iowa go up against some other teams in the league. It seemed like a good tune-up game for them, but on the opposite end, Rapid City, they might be in a little bit of trouble. going up against other teams in the league. Like if they face Wichita or Georgia, they might get lucky, but it's going to be a tough season for them if what this past weekend is any indication for what the future may hold. So we talked through the good, we talked through the bad. Unfortunately, now it's time for the ugly. There's two games here that fall under the ugly category here, and first one I'm going to jump into is going to be the Washington, Oregon. So the game itself, if you were there in person watching it, it was a pretty good game. Oregon ended up winning 47-40. Came down to the wire. Oregon had a big stop towards the end, but this was another broadcast that was very mediocre at best. The graphics package on, like, there was no score bug for the longest time, and when they finally did get a score bug in the second half, it was rough. Like it was a very rough go. They did their best, all things considered, but when their best is what was shown, that's not good enough. And I think part of it comes down to Oregon's venue is just bad. It's not set for arena football. It just isn't. The ceilings are way too low. It's a rodeo venue that they turned into an arena football venue. And you look at any photo that came out of Oregon during that, or Salem, Oregon, where the game was held, the ceilings are so low. You do a side-by-side of Oregon versus like Albany, Oregon versus Salina, Oregon versus Billings. There's at least 40 extra feet of clearance in some of these big arenas. And when pressed about it in an interview on the AFL podcast this week, which has since been deleted off of YouTube and Twitter, interesting, the owner was pretty combative about the comments being made about it. And he was saying, well, we have certain limitations, and those people with bigger arenas, they pay a lot more money to be in those arenas. And the fans that were there, they didn't seem to have any problem with the low ceilings. They didn't seem to have any problem with the padded cattle gates that we have as walls. The walls were not regulation. Last week, during the week before this past weekend, during the preseason game, they played at Oregon. They didn't have any nets up, and they had the cattle gates with 4-inch padding all around the perimeter. And I reached out to one of the players, and I was like, "Hey, so what's the deal with the walls? Like that doesn't seem very safe." And the player said, "Well, they're going to have the real walls next week. That's what they told us." I was like, "Okay, cool. They're going to have real walls next week. That's awesome. Good to hear. Crisis averted. We're good." Fast forward to next week, it's the same exact thing. It's cattle gate with padding along the wall. So anytime somebody got, hit into the cattle gate, the standard for player safety is just not there in Oregon. And so somebody's going to get very, very hurt there, and it's going to be a problem. And I think some of the comments made by the Oregon owner during that since deleted podcast were a little bit concerning, because what the AFL needs is they need an owner who's going to cut a check, not cut a corner. And this seems like a situation where the ownership, I don't know if it goes up to the singular one person or the group that's running the team, they're cutting a lot of corners, and that's not what the league needs right now. They need to be in arenas where the rent might be a little bit higher, but the player safety standard is much higher as well. So I just fear that somebody's going to get very, very hurt in Oregon. And based on the venue itself, it's clearly not made for arena football. They're trying to do the best that they can. Almost every single kick was going off of the ceiling. The nets were not regulation compared to some of the other teams in the league. That's something else where it's like, man, the nets that these teams hang up for arena football should not vary as drastically as they do. Every single other arena had the standard yellow, steel perimeter. Like, it's very standard. If you've ever watched an arena football game from the past, you know exactly what I'm talking about. In Oregon, they had like this black steel or black aluminum that was very thin, and you could not see it on the broadcast. Like, you had to take a screenshot, enhance the brightness all the way up, and then you might accidentally see the perimeter of it. And some of the coaching staff for Oregon said, yeah, we went with this one so the ball could have extra bounce. When in reality, that's a lie. The reason why they went with what they did was because the standard yellow ones that you see at any arena football game, would not fit in the venue. because the venue is too small and not made for arena football. So it just seems like an oversight from the league's part in letting that venue choice be made for the team, just because it's not fit for arena football, and I'm kind of glad that the broadcast was as poor as it was, so that you didn't see the reality of the arena in its in its current state. But Oregon did end up winning the game, so good for Oregon. They'll have a couple road games where they'll play in a real arena, and it should be a wake up call for the members of the leadership there and the team itself. And there's nothing the team can do, right? They're just going out there and playing the game. That's all they can do. But and something else that I have on my notes here that I almost forgot is that the Washington Wolfpack, after the game, they said, yeah, well, we had to fire up a mobile hotspot to stream the game because the venue didn't have high-speed internet. It's like, guys, what are we doing here? Like, we're streaming an AFL game through somebody's mobile hotspot with an audio video setup that someone might have ran to Best Buy the day of and gotten stuff and just figuring it out as they go. It's like, this shouldn't be the standard. I know it's not the standard, because if you look at Albany, Orlando, and the broadcast that they provided, it was like you were watching an entirely different sport. Like the Oregon Washington game looked like you were watching somebody's camcorder following the game as it was happening, instead of it being an actual broadcast for the air quote premier arena and indoor football league. So it's just very frustrating from a fan experience, because I want this league to succeed. I want this league to do better. I know they can do better, but stuff like this, if that viewing experience was your first experience with the AFL, you're not going to watch it again. You're just not going to. Oregon, I don't think there's anything they can do to really make it better this season. So hopefully they can figure something out for beyond this season. But as of right now, it was an ugly venue, ugly broadcast. It was just bad all around. Lastly, we've got the ugly of the ugly. So if we could have a subsection of ugly in this ugly section, this game would be in it. And it's the Philadelphia Soul at the Louisiana Voodoo. We'll start with the Voodoo because that's a little less ugly than the Soul at this point. The Voodoo were set to kick off their season in Lake Charles. So originally the Voodoo, in like a decade ago in AFL 1.0, 2.0, they were the New Orleans Voodoo, and they played in New Orleans. Now, there's speculation as to why they came back as the Louisiana Voodoo, with the census being that they couldn't secure a deal with the arena in New Orleans, so they kind of had to venture out. So Lake Charles is like, I think 3.5 hours outside of New Orleans. So a big difference from what they were years ago as the New Orleans Voodoo. And I think it was a week and a half, 2 weeks before the season is set to start, they announced, hey guys, we're moving to Lafayette, which, if you're not familiar with Louisiana geography, I don't blame you. I wasn't either before this. Lafayette is about 90 miles away from Lake Charles. So a week before the season, they're moving 90 miles away to an entirely different city with a home game in week one. It's just stuff like that is just so frustrating, because leading into the season, the leadership of the AFL, they always harped on, oh, we don't announce anything, we don't do anything until everything is set in stone, all the T's are crossed, all the I's are dotted, everything is good to go. Clearly everything was not good to go, because they had a falling out with the arena in Lake Charles. The arena was saying, hey, AFL was supposed to pay us all this rent for the events and pay this and pay that, and they didn't. The AFL turns around and says, well, if anyone knows the Lake Charles arena, they know that they're very difficult to work with. Then why was that the first choice? So it's just an ugly situation where a week before AFL is supposed to kick off, they move 90 miles away to a new venue. And that means all the tickets they sold for Lake Charles have to be refunded, and they have to, start from scratch. So I feel bad for the behind the scenes team that had to, do all that stuff and get all that stuff taken care of. And if you want to go to our X/Twitter page, Off the Wall FB, we posted a side-by-side picture of the Albany Nets versus the Louisiana Nets, and it looks very, very different. Like clearly the regulation standard nets for arena football would not fit in this venue either. Now, the speculation is that they'll be in a bigger venue next year in Lafayette, but that's all speculation. Like, who knows, right? This could be the Band-Aid solution that they have now, could be their permanent solution until something else happens. But the nets were bad. It looked like they found some scrap metal and some fishing net and kind of, rigged it all together to work. And it was just a bad look for the league. And this is one of your legacy franchises that you're reviving, and that's the look. So there was a reason why this game was also one of the games that was not streamed, just because I think the league knew that it was going to be a bad look for the presentation, as well as the situation that was happening with the Soul that we'll touch on in just a moment. But the walls were moving anytime they were ran into. So you had players and people holding the walls in place during the game. The nets were bad. The field didn't look good. It was just a mess from every angle, and it was hard to find any positives for it. I did hear from some people that went to the game in Lafayette. They said they had a great time. It was a fun experience. I'm happy for them. I'm glad they had a fun experience. I'm not gonna rain on their parade, but as a whole, optics wise, it was a very, very tough look for the Louisiana Voodoo as well as the AFL. Lastly, we're going to touch on the ugliest of the ugly, and that's the situation with the Philadelphia Soul. So we could probably go on a long tangent about this, but I'm going to try to keep it tidied up and put a little bow on it for you so that we're not here for another couple hours. Basically, from the jump, the Philadelphia Soul have been a mess in this AFL 3.0. They're a legacy brand that was around in the 2000s, around in the 2010s. They were popular for being owned by John Bon Jovi and Ron Jaworski. So they were a very popular brand. They won a couple arena bowl championships in the 2010s, and they were a legacy franchise that the league felt was very important to bring back. They had ownership in place. Everything looked great. Everything was like, all right, let's go. Philadelphia Soul, we're back. Flash forward a couple months and the ownership group drops out and the league doesn't really say anything about it. The league takes ownership of the team. So the league is running the team at this point. At this point, when the league assumes ownership, they should have pushed the Soul to 2025. That's the reality. They should have pushed them, but I feel like the ego of the leadership was a little, that would have taken a little bit of hit on there, just because that would have made them have less teams than the IFL, who they deemed as their competitor at this point. So I don't think that was on the table for them, even though it should have been. So the AFL has ownership of the Philadelphia Soul, and they're running things, air quote, running things at this point. So flash forward to about a week before the season starts. Season kicks off on Saturday. Head coach resigns on Thursday. Not a ton of clarity on the reasons, but it's believed that some of the things that happened the following days were the reasons why the head coach ended up resigning. Head coach resigns on Thursday. Friday comes around. The team doesn't have a way to get to Louisiana. They're all stationed at a hotel to be, transported to the airport to fly down to New Orleans to then take a 2.5, 3 hour bus ride to Lafayette. It later comes out that there was no transportation back from Louisiana booked. There was no transportation from New Orleans to Lafayette booked, according to the players and according to some of their representation. So there was nothing booked. And quite frankly, there was no way that the team was going to get transported, let alone coached in this game. So Friday morning comes around, the players get locked out of the hotel that they're staying in because the hotel is saying, hey, the league booked this hotel, they haven't paid, so we're keeping all of your stuff. Don't know exactly how everything went down after that. The players are saying that they had to call the police to get their stuff back. Conversations were had between the league and the hotel and the players. We're hopefully going to find out more information about exactly what happened this week. But the players in the parking lot of the hotel they just got kicked out of were served with termination/release forms by the league, basically saying, hey, you are no longer a member of the Philadelphia Soul. So they had all this build up to this point only to have the rug yanked out from under them. And again, to this point, the league has not acknowledged anything. But this is all coming to light because players have access to social media. Their representation and agents have access to social media. So if they're getting jerked around like this, they're going to come out and say something. So The league was getting pressed for answers, still nothing. Saturday, the day of the game, the Philadelphia Soul announced on their X profile that they hired a coach of the Dallas Falcons in the AA2, which is a lower tiered arena football team. And the solution for the Philadelphia Soul from the league was that they were going to hire the team that is the Dallas Falcons to act as the Philadelphia Soul against the Louisiana Voodoo. That was going to be what was debuting in AFL 3.0 for this legacy franchise that won multiple arena bowls in the original editions of the AFL. That was going to be their debut, was this lower tiered arena team in the Philadelphia Soul uniforms. No disrespect to the Dallas Falcons of the AA2, but it's a different standard, or it should be at least. So this game was not broadcast due to technical issues beyond our control. I think we know the reality of it between the poor venue in Louisiana and the situation with the team. They still haven't come out and addressed anything. They keep sidestepping it on their in the AFL's official podcast. They're trying to feed us this line of, would you rather have partial answers now or a full answer later? When in reality, we just want you to take ownership and accountability and say, hey, we messed this up, but we're going to do our best to fix this. That game should not have been played. It really should not have. It's just a messy situation that we'll hopefully get more information on this upcoming week, but it was as ugly as it could get. And unfortunately, the ugliness of that situation outshined a lot of the good and stuff that happened all throughout the week, just because the AFL refused to take accountability or take any ownership of the bad situation that went down. So hopefully we'll get some answers this week. Hopefully some of the players that got, quite frankly, screwed over by this situation, the original Soul players, hopefully they'll find a home somewhere else in the league, and hopefully they'll get something figured out. But this is a bad look for the league, and to have this happen in week one, we're getting articles written in the Philadelphia Inquirer about this situation, detailing how messy it is, and the AFL still has not come out and said anything. We've got first-person accounts of, hey, I'm at the gate of the airport, and none of my team is here. AFL hasn't said anything. You've got the diehard AFL fans who are going to war for the AFL in this situation, saying like, "Oh, you don't know all the details." Yeah, because the AFL is not saying anything. Of course, we don't know all the details. Like, come out and say, "Hey, we messed this up. We're gonna get this fixed and we're gonna get this right." They haven't done that yet, so it's very disappointing, and it's not the way a premier arena and indoor football league is supposed to be run. It's going to be an interesting damage control that they do from here, because they haven't done themselves any favors. They're doing press tours all throughout the country, hopping on podcasts, doing this at the stock market, doing this appearance, that appearance. Meanwhile, you are having teams kicked out of hotels and fired the day before the week one. For what reason? There is none. So the AFL has to do better, and I know I'm being pretty harsh on them, but I want this league to succeed very, very badly. I want them to be successful, but doing stuff like this is usually an indication or a precursor of even worse things to happen, because if that is what we've seen so far, that's usually just the tip of the iceberg of what we don't see. So I'm still hopeful for the best, but given how everything went down, I'm preparing for the worst. So that's the show. A little bit of a jumbo-sized off the wall for you with the interview in between the IFL and AFL segments. Again, big thank you to Justin Rankin. Please go follow him on all the socials and follow along on his journey. Follow us on at Off the Wall FB, F as in foot, B as in ball, on Instagram, Twitter, X, TikTok, all that fun stuff. Come say hi. And hop in the comment sections, troll me, do whatever you want. But yeah, there's only 24 hours in a day, and the fact that you spent an hour and a half, 2 hours, I don't know how long this is, I'm sorry. The fact that you chose to spend that time with me means a lot. So appreciate you hopping on board the Off the Wall ship here that we've got going. And yeah, come say hi on the socials, and we'll see you next week. Bye.